I'm Avery Harper, 20 years old, a sophomore majoring in political science at the University of Wisconsin. After finals, I drove 3 hours from Madison to Green Bay for Christmas break. The whole way, I kept the radio on low, humming along to familiar Christmas tunes. I pictured walking into the house, the smell of Mom's gingerbread cookies filling the air, the sound of my little brother Dylan's laughter as he tried to piece together a new puzzle with Dad. I thought about the old armchair by the fireplace, where I'd curl up with a book every holiday, and the proud look in Mom's eyes when I told her about the A I got on my essay. Those warm images made the 3-hour drive feel shorter. But as I turned onto our familiar street, my heart stopped. A wooden for sale sign, painted white, stood in the front yard, its red letters screaming. I slowed down, eyes glued to the sign, trying to figure out if I'd misread it. No, I hadn't. That was my house, or rather, it used to be. I parked, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, my breath coming in short gasps. The house in front of me was empty. Cold. No curtains covered the windows. No trace of furniture or the little chandelier Mom loved in the living room. Only a dead silence hung over everything. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching on the thin layer of snow. The December wind cut through my coat, but I didn't feel it, only the hollow ache tearing at my chest. On the porch, 2 black trash bags sat abandoned, tied tightly, as if someone had been in a hurry to get rid of them. I knelt down, my fingers trembling as I untied the first bag. Inside were the winter sweaters I'd left at home, a few textbooks from my freshman year, and a picture frame, the wooden frame Dad had made for my 16th birthday. The glass was shattered, revealing a family photo taken by Lake Michigan 4 years ago. We stood on the sand, Dad's arm around Mom, Dylan hugging a ball, and me smiling brightly between them. That smile in the photo now felt like a knife, sharp and painful. I sat down on the porch, the trash bag beside me, trying to recall any sign I might have missed. Just last week, I'd called Mom, telling her about finals. She'd laughed, asked if I was eating enough, reminded me to dress warmly. Not a single warning, not a hint that everything was about to fall apart. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it, and dialed Aunt Susan, Mom's sister, who's always been like a friend to me. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Aunt Susan?" I said, my voice breaking. "What's going on? The house is empty. There's a for sale sign." A long silence followed. Then she sighed, her voice hesitant. "You don't know, Avery? Your parents moved last week. They said you were busy with school, that you didn't need to know." Her words hit like a punch. I choked, barely managing a weak no. "I'm sorry," Aunt Susan went on. "I thought you knew. I told them they had to tell you, but..." She trailed off, and I didn't need to hear more. I hung up, my head spinning. I called Dad. The phone rang 5, 6 times, each ring stretching into forever. Finally, he answered, his voice flat, emotionless. "We've moved. You're grown now. Handle it." "Dad, wait!" I shouted, but he'd already hung up. I called again straight to voicemail, that cold prompt. "Leave a message." I tried Mom's number right to voicemail. Dylan, my little brother, who I thought would always pick up when I needed him, didn't answer either. I stood there on the freezing porch, phone in hand, feeling like the entire world had just vanished. The sunset cast an orange-gold glow across the snow-covered lawn. The oak tree Dad and I planted when I was 6 still stood tall in the corner of the yard, its branches rustling in the wind. I remembered that day Dad in his baseball cap, laughing loudly as I fumbled with the shovel, saying the tree would grow up with me. Now it stood there, belonging to a house that was no longer mine. I'd sent part of my scholarship money home each month, carefully budgeting so Mom and Dad wouldn't have to worry about utility bills. I maintained a 3.8 GPA, worked at a coffee shop near campus to cover my own expenses, never asking for a dime. I was the good kid, no parties, no trouble, always doing what they expected. Yet they threw me away, without explanation, without a single look back. I didn't cry, though my chest felt like it was being crushed. Instead, I stood up, dragged the 2 trash bags to the car, and loaded them into the trunk as if I were collecting the remnants of myself. I drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, where the stale smell of cigarette smoke clung to the worn carpet, and the sound of a TV from the next room seeped through the thin walls. In that unfamiliar room, I opened the trash bags, laying each item on the faded bedspread. A few books, sweaters Mom had once neatly folded for me, the broken picture frame with our family's fake smiles. I sat there staring at the pile, and a quiet resolve grew inside me. If they didn't need me, I didn't need them. I'd cut off all contact and build a new life, one they could never touch or destroy. I sat in the small motel room, the neon light from outside filtering through the thin curtains, casting faint glows on the wall. The stuff from the trash bags still lay on the bed, a few textbooks, sweaters Mom had once carefully folded. The broken frame with the family photo that now felt like a bitter reminder. I was only 20, thought I was ready for anything, but I never imagined a day when my own parents would abandon me. It felt like the world had flipped upside down, and I was free-falling, not knowing where I'd land. My parents were Irish American, raised in the working-class neighborhoods of Green Bay, where every dollar earned was soaked in sweat. Dad worked at an auto factory, coming home with hands stained by motor oil, telling stories of his grueling days so Dylan and I wouldn't have to live like he did. Mom was a cashier at a supermarket, always smiling at customers, even when her feet ached after a shift. They'd talk about how they had only a few bucks in their pockets when they got married, about the sacrifices they made to give us a home, a chance. "We do it all so you kids can have a future," Dad would say, his eyes shining with pride when I brought home a report card full of A's. "School's your ticket, Avery. Don't waste it." I took those words to heart like gospel. When friends invited me to weekend parties, I stayed in the library, nose buried in books. In the summers, while others worked at ice cream shops or movie theaters, I took unpaid internships at a local law office, learning to organize files and listening to dry legal stories. The scholarship to the University of Wisconsin was the biggest reward, not just for me, but for the whole family. The night I got the acceptance letter, Mom hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, and Dad cracked open a rare beer to celebrate. "The Harper girl's gonna make something of herself," he said. And I believed they'd always be there, cheering me on. But Dylan, my little brother, was different. At 16, he was lazy with school, more interested in gaming than homework, and had been caught shoplifting at a convenience store. The first time, Mom cried all night, but Dad just sighed and said, "He's young, he'll find his way." The second time, they still defended him, took him to counseling, bought him a new lunchbox to keep him at home. I was never jealous Dylan was my brother, and I just wanted him to be okay. But now, standing in the ruins of my own life, I couldn't help but wonder, why did they forgive every mistake Dylan made, yet were so quick to discard me, the kid who never let them down? That night, I lay on the motel bed, listening to the rumble of trucks outside. Pain and anger swirled together, but I didn't let myself drown in them. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed Professor Margaret Klein, who taught my public policy class. I admired her sharp, dedicated, with a way of speaking that made you feel like you could change the world. I told her everything. The for sale sign, the trash bags, Dad's cold voice, the silence from Mom and Dylan. I tried to keep my voice steady, but when I mentioned the bags on the porch, my throat tightened. "They really left you?" she asked, her tone full of disbelief, as if she couldn't accept it herself. "I don't know what to do now," I said, admitting for the first time that I was lost. "The dorms are closed for break, and Listen, Avery," she cut in, her voice firm. "You can stay with me until the dorms reopen. Don't worry about money or anything else. We'll figure it out." I went quiet, stunned that she'd offer to help a student like me. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Absolutely," she replied. "Now pack your things and drive over. I'll make tea." The next morning, I arrived at Professor Klein's house, an old wooden home on the outskirts of Madison, its walls draped in ivy, the inside filled with the scent of old books and pine. Her lazy cat, Oscar, gave me a glance before napping by the fireplace. She handed me the key to the guest room, a small space with a single bed and a window overlooking the garden. "No time limit," she said, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Focus on your studies, Avery. You're stronger than you know." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me from the waves, threatening to swallow me. Christmas break was supposed to be a time to relax, but I didn't let myself rest. I opened my laptop, reviewed old lecture notes, and jotted down ideas for my upcoming thesis. Professor Klein noticed my restlessness, and one afternoon, as we sat by the fireplace, she said, "I know someone at the Green Bay Legal Aid Center. They're looking for summer interns to work on housing rights. Interested?" I nodded immediately, no hesitation. "Turn your pain into power," she said, handing me a mug of hot tea. "You've got this." I looked at the tea, thinking of the broken picture frame, of the milestones my family once celebrated: high school graduation, the Lake Michigan trip, nights spent watching movies together. They'd thrown it all away, just like they'd thrown me away. That night, I blocked my parents' numbers. Dylan's, even Aunt Susan's, who might try to convince me to forgive. If anyone asked about my family, I'd say simply, we don't talk. No sob stories, no begging for pity. I was rebuilding my life from scratch, and the past with all its false love had no place in this new foundation. That summer, I walked into the Green Bay Legal Aid Center with a light backpack and a heavy heart. I'd hoped Christmas break would be a fresh start, but instead, it left a scar not the kind that fades with time, but the kind that reminds you how deeply you've been hurt. Still, I refused to let pain define me. I had Professor Klein, the internship opportunity, and most importantly, I had myself and Avery, who no longer waited for approval from those who'd turned their backs on me. The internship started with simple tasks: photocopying documents, answering emails, making coffee for busy lawyers. I didn't complain. Every stack of papers I organized, every cup of coffee I delivered, was a small step that made me feel like I was moving forward. But what really changed everything was when Laura Bennett, my supervisor, saw I was more than just a diligent student. One afternoon, I was taking notes in the meeting room when a client walked in, Maria, a single mother with red-rimmed eyes, clutching a stack of eviction notices. She spoke quickly, her voice trembling, about her landlord doubling the rent without warning. I sat beside her, listening, asking gentle questions, and slowly she calmed down and shared her full story. When she left, Laura looked at me and smiled. "You've got a knack for connecting with people, Avery. Not everyone can do that." From then on, Laura assigned me to assist with client interviews. I met families displaced from low-income housing due to real estate projects, elderly people coerced into unfair contracts by landlords, and students like me scammed out of deposits by unscrupulous renters. Each story hit me hard, not just because of the injustice, but because I saw myself in them. People abandoned by the system, stripped of the places they called home. I took meticulous notes, sometimes staying late at the office to review cases, searching for ways to help. The work wasn't just work. It was how I regained a sense of control, a sense of worth. One evening, after interviewing 3 families from the same apartment complex all given 2 weeks' notice to leave, I sat surrounded by papers, my mind spinning. The developer offered 2 weeks' motel vouchers, as if that were enough to start over. "These people will end up on the street," I muttered, not realizing Laura was standing in the doorway. "Burned out already?" she asked, leaning against the frame, her expression both serious and warm. I looked up, my voice laced with frustration. "2 weeks isn't enough, Laura. They need homes, not motels. This system is so wrong." She nodded, not dismissing my feelings. "It is wrong, but what are you going to do to change it?" Her question was like a spark, both a challenge and an ignition of something inside me. I was just a sophomore, no degree, no power. But I couldn't just sit and complain. At a campus finance workshop, I'd heard about the University of Wisconsin's Community Innovation Fund, a small grant for students with projects addressing social issues. An idea took shape: a housing support program for students and low-income residents, offering free legal advice, emergency financial aid, and advocacy to fight unfair landlords. I called it Safe Haven. The proposal deadline was 10 days away. I stayed up 3 nights straight, typing line after line on my laptop in Professor Klein's guest room, with the faint sound of Oscar the cat snoring nearby. I wrote about what I'd seen at the Legal Aid Center, about Maria, about students losing housing mid-semester. I calculated budgets, planned a small office with volunteers. Laura helped me refine the legal sections, ensuring every clause was clear. Professor Klein read the final draft and nodded. "This isn't just a project, Avery. It's your mission." I submitted the proposal at the last minute, heart pounding, not daring to hope too much. While waiting for the results, my parents started calling again. 6 months after abandoning me, a voicemail from Dad came through. "Avery, your mom's worried about you. Call back." No apology, no explanation, just a command, as if I were still the obedient little girl from before. I listened to the message, my finger hovering over the delete button, but I kept it. 3 days later, Mom called. "This silence is childish, Avery. We're family." The word family felt like a bitter joke. I saved the message but didn't respond. The calls kept coming. Dad angry, Mom pleading, even Dylan leaving a short message. "Sis, call back." Not once did they mention the trash bags, the empty house, or the wound they'd left behind. Then one morning, an email from the Community Innovation Fund arrived. Safe Haven was awarded $20,000. I read it over and over, my heart ready to burst. I wanted to scream, to share the joy with someone, but not my parents, not Dylan. I ran to Professor Klein's house, hugged her tightly, and babbled like a kid. That evening, I called Laura, and we celebrated with a simple pizza dinner at the legal aid office. They, Professor Klein, Laura, the people who believed in me were my new family, not bound by blood, but by genuine respect. I kept working at the legal aid center, learning how to negotiate with landlords and draft appeals. Each day, I felt stronger, as if I were building a new home not with bricks and mortar, but with willpower and purpose. Safe haven was still just an idea on paper, but I knew it would soon become real. And no matter how many times my parents called, I wouldn't look back. I'd chosen my path, and this time, no one could pull me off it. That fall, Safe Haven began to take shape, transforming from a paper idea into something real and alive. With the $20,000 from the Community Innovation Fund, I rented a small corner in the Green Bay Legal Aid Center's office, just big enough for an old desk, a few chairs, and a whiteboard for brainstorming. I recruited 3 volunteers, 2 law students from my school, and a classmate passionate about social justice. We worked like a task force, racing against time to help people facing eviction. By October, Safe Haven had assisted 18 students in avoiding eviction, from negotiating with landlords to connecting them with free lawyers. Each time someone left our office with a relieved smile, I felt like I'd laid another brick in my new home, not my parents' house, but one I'd built myself with sweat and belief. But the work was never easy. I was still a sophomore, juggling classes, group projects, and shifts at the coffee shop. Some days, I'd rush from lecture halls to the office, eating a granola bar in the car. At night, I sat surrounded by files, reading every line of desperate letters from clients of freshmen whose landlord kept his deposit. A single mom served an eviction notice right before the holidays. I didn't just work, I lived those stories, letting them remind me I couldn't give up. Laura, my supervisor at the center, would see me working late and say, "Don't burn yourself out, Avery, you need rest." But rest felt like a luxury when so many people needed help. As Safe Haven began to take root, my parents kept calling. The calls came like waves, sometimes relentless, sometimes quiet, but never stopping. It had been nearly 8 months since I found the empty house, and they still hadn't apologized. One evening, while I was checking emails, a voicemail from Dad popped up. "Avery, your mom can't sleep worrying about you. Call back, we need to talk." His voice was still stiff, as if I were the one in the wrong. I deleted the message, but the next day Mom called. "You can't keep shutting us out like this. We're family, Avery." The word family felt like a dull knife, not sharp, but enough to sting. Dylan left a message too, short and awkward. "Sis, I know you're mad, but call back, please." I saved them all, not because I wanted to hear them again, but as proof that they still didn't grasp what they'd done. Aunt Susan, Mom's sister, started texting. "Your mom cries every night," she wrote. "They were wrong, but can't you forgive them?" I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen, but didn't reply. Forgive? Forgiveness required them to admit they'd abandoned me, thrown my things into trash bags, sold the house without a word. But they didn't. They just wanted me to come back, obedient as before, as if everything could be erased with a few pleas. One Wednesday afternoon, I was sitting with Mia, a freshman who'd come for help. She spoke shakily about her landlord evicting her despite her paying rent on time. I took notes, trying to figure out how to connect her with a lawyer. Just then, the phone on the desk rang. I picked it up, my voice professional. "Safe Haven, this is Avery." On the other end, a familiar voice made my heart sink. "Avery, is that you?" My mom. I froze, nearly dropping the receiver. "How did you get this number?" I asked, struggling to stay calm. "From your website," she said, her voice hesitant. "Why won't you answer us? We're so worried, Avery." Mia sat across from me, watching curiously. I gestured an apology, covered the receiver, and whispered, "Mia, I need to handle this for a minute. Can you wait outside?" She nodded and left the room. I turned back to the phone, my voice turning cold. "This is my workplace. Don't call here again." "We're your parents," Mom said, her voice breaking. "We have a right to contact you." I laughed, but it wasn't out of amusement. "That right was lost," I cut in, "when you and Dad threw my stuff in trash bags and sold the house without a word." She started to explain, her voice trembling. "We were struggling, Avery. Your dad lost his job. The house was foreclosed. We were ashamed, didn't want you to know. Her words were like a needle, piercing the armor I'd built over months. Foreclosure, job loss. They'd never mentioned money troubles, even though I sent money home each month. If something was wrong, why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice softening slightly despite myself. I was sending money. I could have helped. Your dad wouldn't allow it, she replied. He was too proud. You know how he is. I knew. Dad's pride was like a stone wall, separating the family since I was little. He never asked for help, never admitted weakness, but pride didn't justify what they did. I have to work, I said, my voice hardening again. Don't call here anymore. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly as I set the receiver down. Mia came back, and I forced a smile, continuing to advise her as if nothing had happened. But in my mind, I couldn't stop replaying Mom's words. A tiny part of me wanted to believe they had a reason, that they hadn't meant to be cruel. The larger part, though, knew reasons didn't erase the hurt. That evening, I stayed late at the office, organizing files to keep my mind off things. Laura found me sitting among piles of papers, the fluorescent light making my face look pale. Everything okay? She asked, pulling up a chair beside me. I told her about the call, about Mom's explanation. Part of me wants to believe them, I admitted, but another part just feels angry. Laura nodded, her eyes full of empathy. People rarely hurt others just to be cruel, Avery. But reasons and excuses aren't the same. No matter how tough things were for them, they chose to hurt you. She was right. I didn't need their explanations to move forward. Safe haven was proof I could build something meaningful from the rubble. I looked at the whiteboard, where I'd written names of clients to call back, plans for the next week. This was my new life, not to prove anything to my parents, but to prove it to myself. I turned off the office lights, locked the door, and stepped out under Green Bay's starry sky. No matter how many times my parents called, I wouldn't let them pull me back. I was on my own path now, and this time I wouldn't look back. Winter in Green Bay was brutal, with snow blanketing the streets, but I no longer felt the cold like before. Safe haven had become inseparable from me, like breathing. With the initial grant, we expanded the team, hiring a full-time volunteer and buying a new printer so we didn't have to run to the copy shop every week. I still raced between classes and the office, but now each step felt steadier. I wasn't just helping others keep their homes. I was building my own a place no one could take away. But then, one morning in mid-January, while checking emails between classes, I got a shock. I opened Dylan's Instagram, something I'd avoided for months, and saw a post from 3 months earlier. It was a photo of the whole family standing in front of a new house in Milwaukee, its cream-colored walls and windows glowing with Christmas lights. Mom, Dad, and Dylan were beaming as if nothing had ever happened. The caption read, "New beginnings, thank God. No foreclosure, no job loss, no crisis. Just a simple, brutal truth. They'd chosen to leave me behind, to start a life without me." The photo hit like a punch, reviving every feeling I'd tried to bury: betrayal, loneliness, and the foolish hope that they'd had a good reason. I closed my phone, telling myself I didn't need them anymore. But that evening, sitting in Professor Klein's living room, I told her about the post. "It hurts," I admitted, "but it's also a relief. At least now I know the truth." She nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "The truth can hurt, Avery, but it also sets you free. You don't have to wonder about them anymore." While I grappled with the past, Safe Haven was gaining attention. A local newspaper wrote an article about us, calling the program a beacon of hope for students and low-income residents in Green Bay. The article led to an invitation for an interview with a regional news channel, and I stood in front of the camera, sharing my journey. Not the story of the trash bags and the empty house, but why I started Safe Haven, so no one would have to feel like they'd lost everything, as I once did. After the broadcast, the office phone rang nonstop, from people needing help to volunteers wanting to join. Laura saw the stack of files piling up on my desk and said, "We need bigger resources, Avery." She suggested applying for a grant from the Wisconsin Community Fund, enough to rent a dedicated office and hire full-time staff. I dove into writing the proposal, spending weeks gathering data, interviewing past clients, and outlining a vision. Expanding Safe Haven citywide, not just for students, but for anyone facing housing injustice. The 40-page proposal was every ounce of my sweat and determination. Laura reviewed it, made a few edits, and smiled, This is a game changer. Just as I submitted the proposal, an unexpected call stopped me in my tracks. A Green Bay number, but not my parents. I answered cautiously. "Hello? Avery, it's Mrs. Carter." My old neighbor's voice came through, warm but tinged with worry. "I hope I'm not bothering you. Your old house was broken into last night." I froze. "Broken into? But it's empty." "It is," she said. "The police think thieves were looking for valuables. But the strange thing is, they left an envelope with your name on it." My heart raced. "What envelope?" Mrs. Carter hesitated. "I haven't opened it, but it looks important. It's from a law office in Chicago. The police gave it to me since I'm watching the house." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Can you open it? Read it to me." I heard paper rustling. Then she spoke slowly. "It's about your grandmother Ellen's estate. You've inherited a plot of land outside Milwaukee, sold for $300,000. I could barely breathe. "What?" Grandma had passed when I was 12. She had nothing but a small house. "The letter says the land was developed into a resort, Mence," Carter explained. "And one more thing, Avery. The notice was sent to your parents over a year ago." Everything stopped. They knew. My parents knew about the inheritance before they abandoned me, before they stuffed my things into trash bags and sold the house. They knew I'd get a huge sum of money, yet chose to let me walk away with nothing. I thanked Mrs. Carter, jotted down the law office's details, and hung up. Sitting in the quiet room, I felt anger flare, but beneath it was a profound sadness. They didn't just abandon me, they deliberately hid a piece of my future. I called Laura and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said, "What they did is unforgivable, Avery. But this money is yours, not theirs. What will you do with it?" I didn't have an answer yet. The funds hadn't arrived, and I wasn't in a rush to decide. But one thing I knew for sure. This truth severed the last thread tying me to my parents. They weren't worth turning back for, not even for a second. The next day I returned to Safe Haven, focusing on new cases. I called clients, met with volunteers, and prepared for the next interview. The truth about the inheritance hurt, but it also made me stronger. I didn't need my parents to prove my worth. I had Safe Haven, Laura, Professor Klein, and most importantly, I had myself an Avery who was no longer afraid, ready to face any storm ahead. Spring came to Green Bay with gentle breezes and warm sunlight, as if the city were trying to soothe the cold months I'd endured. Safe Haven was no longer a small project. The Wisconsin Community Fund grant was within reach, and I was preparing for the decisive presentation, a chance to turn the program into a full-fledged organization, helping not just students, but struggling families across the city. I spent weeks rehearsing, standing in front of the mirror reciting the presentation, tweaking every sentence to ensure it would touch the hearts of the panel. Laura helped me refine the data, while Professor Klein reminded me, "Tell your story, Avery. Not just numbers, but people." The presentation took place on a Saturday morning at the sleek office of the Wisconsin Community Fund in downtown Madison. I arrived an hour early, sitting in the waiting area in a tailored navy blazer, not flashy, but professional enough. In my hands were note cards, though I knew every word by heart. Laura arrived later in an elegant gray suit, giving me an encouraging smile. "You're ready, just be yourself." I nodded, though my stomach churned with nerves. This wasn't just a chance for Safe Haven. It was proof I'd overcome what my parents left behind, a girl once abandoned, now standing here to change others' lives. We were ushered into the meeting room, where 8 panel members sat around a polished wooden table. I recognized a few faces from my research: a local entrepreneur, a prominent philanthropist, and a retired judge. The fund's chairman, Daniel Peterson, stood to shake hands, his voice warm. "Ms. Harper, Ms. Bennett, we're very impressed with your proposal. Show us why Safe Haven deserves this." I connected my laptop to the projector, took a deep breath, and began. I shared Safe Haven's journey, from a student's idea to helping dozens keep their homes. I talked about Mia, the freshman who nearly lost her housing mid-exams, and Maria, the single mom who found hope through our support. Laura added legal details, explaining how the program filled gaps in the current system. 20 minutes passed, with the panel listening intently, some nodding and jotting notes. I felt confident, like everything was falling into place. Then the meeting room door swung open. A staff member stepped in, whispering to Mr. Peterson. He turned to me, his expression slightly uneasy. Ms. Harper, apologies for interrupting. There are some people outside claiming to be your family. They say it's urgent and need to see you now. My heart sank. Family. After nearly a year of silence, after 247 calls, I didn't answer. They chose the most critical moment to show up. Laura touched my arm lightly, her eyes reassuring. We can ask them to wait, Mr. Peterson said, looking at me questioningly. I took a deep breath, my voice oddly calm. Please tell them to wait until I'm done. This is important. Mr. Peterson nodded, signaling the staff member to leave. I turned back to the screen, continuing the presentation, though a storm raged in my head. What did they want? Why now? But I didn't let my emotions take over. I spoke about plans to expand Safe Haven hiring staff, opening a new office, helping hundreds each year. The panel asked questions about budget, sustainability, and I answered clearly, drawing on data and my heart. When I finished, Mr. Peterson smiled. Thank you, Ms. Harper, Ms. Bennett. We'll notify you within a week. I nodded, feeling both relieved and hollow. Laura and I packed up, and she patted my shoulder. You did great, no matter what's waiting out there. I gave a weak smile and walked to the lobby. And there they were. Dad, Mom, Dylan. Mom stood the moment she saw me, her eyes brimming with tears, her face a mix of hope and worry. Dad sat still, his eyes tense, as if holding something back. Dylan stood in the middle, awkward, avoiding my gaze. Avery, Mom spoke up, her voice trembling. We need to talk. Laura squeezed my shoulder lightly. I'll leave you some privacy. Call me if you need me. She left, leaving me face to face with the people who once were my entire world. Why is everyone here? I asked, my voice cold. How did you even find me? We saw the article about your program, Mom replied. It said you were presenting today. We've been trying to reach you for months, Avery. 247 calls, I said, almost a whisper. Hard to miss that. Dad stood up, his voice firm. This has gone on too long, Avery. You're acting like a child. I laughed, but there was no joy in it. A child? I came home to find my stuff in trash bags. You sold the house, left, without a word. And I'm the childish one? Mom reached out as if to touch me, but stopped. We were wrong, she said, her voice breaking. We want to make it right. We went to a nearby cafe, sitting around a small table, no one touching the cups of water in front of them. I kept my distance, both physically and emotionally, as they tried to explain. We were struggling, Mom said, her eyes on the table. Your dad lost his job, the house was foreclosed. We didn't want you to carry that burden. And you knew about the inheritance, I cut in, my voice calm but sharp. You knew a year ago that I'd get $300,000, but you still chose to throw me away. So what now? Because Safe Haven made the news? Because I'm successful, you want back in? Dad flushed but didn't argue. We panicked, he said, his voice low. When we learned about the inheritance, we thought if we started over in Milwaukee, we could get stable before you got the money. We didn't want you to think we were relying on you. So you hid it from me, left me with 2 trash bags? I asked, unable to hold back the bitterness. Dylan, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. They were wrong, sis. I was wrong for not saying anything, but they miss you. I looked at him, the kid who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movies, now a head taller than me. Miss me? I repeated. Or miss a version of me you could control? Mom grabbed Dad's hand, her eyes red. We saw you on TV, Avery. We saw what you've done, and we realized we'd lost you. No, I said, my voice steady. You didn't lose me. You chose to leave me. I stood up, tossing a few dollars on the table for the coffee. I've built a new life, with people who value me. If you want to make it right, start by respecting me. Stop calling. I walked out without looking back. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or pain. Just a strange peace, like I'd finally closed a door for good. The next day, the Wisconsin Community Fund called. Safe Haven got the full $250,000 grant, plus $30,000 for operating costs. A week later, a national TV network reached out, wanting to put our story on air. When the show aired, millions watched, and I knew my parents were among them. They didn't call again. I stood in Safe Haven's small office, watching volunteers laugh and chat, files neatly stacked on the desk. The inheritance money sat in my account, but I hadn't decided what to do with it. Maybe I'd invest it in the program, maybe save it for another day. The important thing is that I'm no longer bound by the past. I have Laura, Mrs. Klein, the people I help, and above all, I have myself a stronger, freer Avery, who no longer seeks validation through anyone else's eyes.